Hello, let's talk about real estate. I believe we're heading into a real estate crash and a real estate adjustment. The real estate went up a lot all over the country. The reason why was because the government gave stimulus, so people had the ability of adding up down payment for the house, and mortgage interest rates went down to below 3%, and then it went up a little to 3%. It was very cheap, and people were able to afford to buy houses. The demand went up, there wasn't enough houses, and that caused the real estate to go up a lot. Now, most places in America where real estate is right now, like somewhere around $400,000, $500,000, it will probably be just an adjustment. It's a usual thing. The real estate, when something goes up a lot, it comes down a little bit and then adjusts itself. Now, the reason why is because the government doesn't give any more stimulus and the interest rates went up. But besides the interest rates, it was inflation, and sadly, more and more Americans cannot cover their month because life costs went up so high, gas went up a lot, and they could barely make their month, and people don't have any more to put down down payments for a house. So that will cause people to stop buying houses, and it started happening on a very slow pace, and it looks like it's getting more and more. But it will probably adjust itself, as instead of being like 400,000, the house that was 2 years ago 250, it will go to $300,000. Now a house that was 3 years ago $250,000, and right now, let's say it will be 250 to 300,000, didn't really go up because it adjusted to inflation, because it costs more money to build a house. Now, this is probably going to happen all over the country, and then there were some experts who claimed a while ago that in June and July we'll see a huge, they call it a bloodbath in houses, because what happened was, since the lockdown, you couldn't evict, how do you call it, you couldn't go, houses couldn't go for closure. So a whole bunch of houses were about to go for closure. Now, let's say, I'm just giving a hypothetical number, just a hypothetical example, 100,000 houses are going a year for closure, an estimate. So if it goes $100,000 for closure, it's just like a little small thing in real estate. Now, what if it happens that suddenly you have 2 years combined going for closure at the same time? So you have like over 200,000 houses for closure going at the same time. Now the banks will find themselves full of houses that went for closure, which they couldn't do anything because of the lockdown and the courts, everything was delayed. So it's actually, the numbers are way higher, but just had to shoot a number. So that will cause a huge bloodbath, that there will be a lot of houses that are for sale. But I kind of disagree with it. I can't completely disagree, but the fact is that most people had more money during the lockdown because of the government, the stimulus and all unemployment, those who got unemployment, which a huge percent got it. And the government gave more money, so a lot of people were able to save their houses from going for closure. Even though it was on the brinks of, they were in the brinks of losing their house, they were able to save it. Which, so it will be a lot of houses. I don't know. I guess we'll find out during June and July. But the fact is, of all these factors will cause the real estate to adjust itself. It could be in a lot of neighborhoods will go down the real estate even below 250, below pre-pandemic, as we say. Now the interest rates added salt a lot to it, because interest rates so high. So let's say a house that went for $400,000, that is right now in the market for $400,000. So if someone bought a house last year for $400,000, when interest was around 3%, a little bit more, his mortgage would have been around $2,000 a month, which is almost equivalent to rent for most people who have families. So therefore people were able to, yeah, why not? I'm putting together a down payment and buy a house. So people bought houses. But if the interest rates are already right now above 5%, and let's say even if it's going to go back to 5%, because right now it's 5.7, it will come out to $3,000 a month. I'm not sure if a lot of Americans can afford, I'm talking average Americans can afford $3,000 a month to pay. I'm talking about mortgage and property tax and all, in the area of $3,000 a month. So people will stop buying houses, except it will go down in price. Now, in big cities like New York City, Boston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, all those cities where real estate was very high, there will probably be a big crash. I call it the fantasy real estate market, which was going on for the last 10 to 12 years. The reason why is because houses, first of all, the imbalance. In most places in America, before lockdown, you bought a house for approximately like 250, 300, like an average of 250, we'll say probably 275. And then in New York City and all those other expensive cities, you end up paying a house for over $1 million. I mean, the same square footage, the same thing, it just didn't make any sense. How can it be like 4 times the value? So people say, but way more people want to live here, but still, it has to be some sort of balance. And so it's impossible to last for too long. Maybe in some rich neighborhoods like Manhattan, but not all over not all 5 boroughs, and not in all the whole area of Boston and the whole area of San Francisco and Los Angeles and all those the few other expensive cities. And the main reason is also because even if there's a high demand, there's a certain amount of money of people they could pay. So if you go and you take real estate and you ask people to pay rent, like three or four of their paychecks per month, it's impossible for people to pay that. So people fall behind. And there was a long time that has been going on statistics that a third of New York City is behind the rent, and the same thing was happening in Los Angeles and Boston and all those other big cities, as far as I did my research. So how exactly the real estate kept up so high, the way I see it is what happened was there's a thing called refinancing a house, refinancing a building. So let's say if a person went into real estate, so they put together a certain amount of money to buy the building, and you have to have a certain amount put away in case of you end up being behind a little bit money, extra expenses. And they're able to pull by 3 years. Now it goes by 3 years, they go and they refinance the building, and they get they get money now, which they put in the last 3 years. Now, from this money, they could keep on constantly adding into the building from people who didn't pay rent or all other problems they had with tenants. So they're able to go along like that. And another 3 years, you could go do it again. You could do it again. And that's basically how the people who went into real estate after 2010, after the '08 crash, basically how they kept on nothing more than rotating money. And they all did it because they believed that eventually the real estate will go up so high, it will probably more than double the price in the next 10 years, and it will, in 2030, a regular house will go for like over $2 million, rent will be like $5,000 for a 2-bedroom, and all that fantasy kept on pushing them to keep on going. But in reality, they couldn't even make the mortgages, to pay the mortgages every month. And not only that, the property tax went up, and all the other government regulations keeps on going up like crazy. And it's like almost impossible to run a building in the big city, especially in New York City. So one of the things what happens in refinance is not only the money that you put in. If let's say you bought a building for $5 million, it goes by a few years, it went by 3 years, and the value of the real estate went up, and now this building is valued at $6 million. So not only you could go refinance for the money that you put in your equity, that you paid your mortgages, you could actually go and get an additional $1 million because the value of the building is higher. I mean, if your income is good. So all this whole game was able to go on as long as real estate kept on going up and up and up. Now, once it comes to a point the real estate declines a little bit, and you need to refinance just to keep, like literally, you take the refinancing and pay mortgages with that, like you add to your mortgage, not necessarily you pay for it from it. It comes to a point when the whole thing collapses. It's like you pile up a whole thing of sticks and then you pull the bottom one and the whole thing collapses. This is technically how the real estate is in these big cities. And this is not included people who bought buildings years ago. I'm talking before in the 2000s or before the '08 crash, when they bought it for way cheaper and compared to the price of the mortgages they have, or they probably paid over the mortgages. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the newly investors. So once they could only get a refinance based on their equity, and the real estate declined a little bit, it comes to the point that the banks get afraid of giving you out refinancing. Let's say if it was just 3 years, you need to have way more equity to the bank to trust you because the market is not so hot. So what would all those people do? They will start finding themselves into very tight situations. And right now we have a bigger issue because of the lockdown. A lot of tenants didn't pay their rent because they were able to get away with it. And there's approximately 10% of New York City and other big cities, I saw in Los Angeles is way more than 10%, who are still behind the rent from the lockdown. What are all those lenders going to do? So till now they're able to, they got the government loans, the PP loans, the EIDL loans, all those kind of loans. You're able to somehow, do this and that in order to get by, but it comes to a point like you can't anymore. So the way I see it's going to happen is, first of all, people are going to run out of money from buying houses. So the market will just slow down. That will cause the real estate to go down approximately 15-20%. Now the buildings will lose its value. The people who need to refinance in order to keep the building alive will not have the ability of refinancing, and they will simply get stuck. Now, what do they do? People will just see, I will default in my buildings, might as well let me try to sell it as fast as I can. So you're not dealing with one person. You're always going to have a person here and there, an investor here and there that he's about to default in his building. He's trying to sell it out to try to cash out as much as they can. Imagine this is going to happen with over 10% of the buildings in the city that people are selling because they panic. People will start feeling what's going on. Why is there so many buildings for sale now? And nobody's going to buy, and that will cause a huge crash. And that will cause even more investors to panic. And plus, the interest rates going up so high will add salt to the whole thing. That till now, at least the interest rate was low. And I'm talking about since the 08 crash, the interest rate was never above 5%. So you were able to buy houses. I'm talking individual people or condos. You're able to do it. But right now the interest is so high. How can you possibly go and pay a mortgage on this interest? And if the banks, I doubt they'll be so crazy to go up. I think they will go down, but I can't say anything because I don't know why even they went up to 5.7%. But if they will raise it up to 7%, then it's definitely a real estate crash. So all these things will end up causing real estate crash. And I am not saying a date. I'm not saying when it's going to happen, but it looks like we're closer than further than from that. Now there's another factor about big cities that people don't take account of, which I've been claiming a long time ago. All those big cities, they're not going to last for too long. You're living in a city with a whole bunch of self-destructive people. It's impossible for a city to exist for too long like that. So I don't even see why people will invest from the first place when there's no long-term in those places. Why not go to a more stable, where people are a little bit more normal, and they're actually trying to grow. So one of the factors you could see right now is about crime. Crime is going up in all the big cities, and it's going up more and more. Now, if the crime will keep on going up, let's say New York City, people will pick themselves up and just move away, and nobody's going to come. It's like a lot of people come to New York City as long as they feel safe. Now, the minute that people come here for a while, or they think they want to live here, and suddenly they hear that a friend got into a holdup, or they got into a holdup, they're just going to pick up and run away. So there'll be no newcomers. All the other people will just run away. We could see ourselves in a few years with 2 million people. Like the rate that we saw before, like 400,000 people left New York City between 2017 and 2020. There will be like a joke to what's about to happen. And it looks like it's about to happen. So the whole city, there will be like no tenants, no buyers. The whole real estate could just go to the ground. And it seems to me like it's going to happen. So I just don't see why to invest in such kind of cities from the first place. So this is my analysis on the whole real estate market. You're entitled to disagree. And I hope you all save your money and make a lot of money. Have a wonderful day.